Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm bringing you my first episode in my Getting Into Publishing series. This is something I get a lot of questions about down in the comments, but also in my Instagram and Twitter DMs, and I'm always more than happy to talk to people directly about getting into publishing. But I thought, now that I feel quite secure in that the advice I'm going to be giving you guys is good, that I would put it all in a video series for you. So in this episode, we are going to be covering things like how to find jobs, CVs, and cover letters. I'm going to be doing an episode on whether doing a publishing master's is worth it. I'm going to be doing an episode on interviews. I'm going to be doing an episode on what to do in your first week in publishing. I could also do videos on moving to London, which for a lot of publishers is something that you would have to do because it is so London-centric. I'd love to do a video on how publishing has changed me, maybe some myths about publishing that I could debunk. If you do have any specific questions, do leave them in the comments or send me a message and I will try my best to help you out. So just for a little bit of context, I have been working in publishing since July 2019. Before that, I did a publishing master's, and I just want to say it is by no means mandatory to have a master's, to have any kind of qualification in publishing before you get into the industry. It was a personal choice that was right for me, but it's not for everyone and it's not necessary. I have worked in 2 different companies, but I've had a lot of different roles since my time in publishing. So I started doing an internship in the trade marketing team at the first company I worked at. I then moved into supermarket and special sales. I then joined the high street team, so I was doing special sales and high street sales. That was all at like an admin level, and I was working across a lot of different imprints. I was working across both adult publishing and publishing for children, commercial and literary. I was working on cookbooks. At the start of January, I joined a new company and I am now a junior key account manager, still working on high street and special sales, but I specifically work in children's publishing now. I will do a full episode on sales because I think it's an area of publishing that is really exciting and interesting, but it's not the area of publishing that people think about immediately when they want to get into the industry. But yes, so all things finding jobs, cover letters, CVs. When you first start looking for a job in publishing, I think it's very overwhelming trying to figure out where exactly you can find jobs. A first port of call is the bookseller. The bookseller is the industry magazine and it's online as well. As a general pointer, if you want to get into the publishing industry, I think you should be reading the bookseller. You will be able to access a number of articles for free, but some of them will be behind a paywall and a membership. If this is something that you can't afford at the moment, the accessibility of that is a whole other issue. But you are, for instance, in an educational institution, you may be able to see if they will be able to get a membership for you. But the careers portion of the website you will be able to access, and this is where the majority of publishing companies will advertise their jobs. There are a few other websites that are really great for this. We have the Book Careers website. Creative Access is something that I would really advise for people who are from backgrounds that aren't traditionally represented in publishing or the creative industries as a whole. I also think it's really worth looking for jobs that may not be exactly publishing, but maybe a creative industry, and places like the Guardian's careers site are really good for finding those. I would also really recommend having a really publishing focused Twitter feed. I would often find jobs advertised on Twitter before I went to that particular website to find a job to apply for. Follow publishers on Twitter, follow people that work at those publishers. The pub interns page is really good. I will leave that link down below in the description. You may also find that people who are in that team or in that company are retweeting the job advertisements and are more than happy to answer any questions you might have. My advice for your first job is to apply for anything and everything. It is unlikely that you are going to land your first job at the absolute dream company. I was very lucky that I ended up at a company that I absolutely adored in my first role, but I was applying for everything. I was applying at really small independent publishers that were focused on like craft books. I was applying for really like niche academic publishers. I have no interest in academic publishing. But once you get that first job, once you get that foot in the door, getting the next job will be easier. Something that is worth bearing in mind if you are applying for jobs at the big 5 publishers is that even for entry-level roles, you may be competing with people who already have a year's experience in the publishing industry because they've maybe worked for a year at a niche publisher, at an academic publisher, and want to make the move into trade. So honestly, apply for everything, even if it's not in the particular area of a business that you would want to work in. Like, I never had any interest in working in editorial, which I think is a bit of a rarity. Like, that's the kind of stereotype that everyone wants to work in editorial. I didn't, but I was applying for editorial jobs. Again, it's just that thing of get your foot in the door. I never imagined myself working in sales, and then as soon as I got in there, I was like, oh my god, like, this is exactly where I want to be. Be open to any opportunity that might come your way. You're mainly going to be looking at roles that either have the title of like assistant or administrator. Anything that is a fixed term contract, I would really highly advise applying for that job, because you're less likely to be competing with people who have a permanent job elsewhere. They're not going to risk losing that job for something that might only be 6 months. I had a very methodical approach to how I would organize the jobs that I was applying for. I had a spreadsheet, and I think if you are serious about getting into publishing, you should have a spreadsheet. Trust me, when you get into publishing, you will need to be familiar with spreadsheets. So whether I was finding the jobs on the bookseller website, whether I was coming across them on Twitter, they all went on this spreadsheet. So I would put what the job title was, what company it was at. If the salary was advertised, which it should be, I would put that on there as well. I would put where the job was based, and crucially, I would put the deadline for the application. I would also put if it needed any additional pieces of work. So the standard is, of course, CV and cover letter, but there might be some sort of questionnaire that you have to answer. Basically, all of the information that I needed for that job, and a link to it, of course, was on that spreadsheet. And the most important thing was that it was ordered by deadlines. So I wasn't going to miss a deadline for a job application. If you're a calendar person, you can also put a reminder in like your Google Calendar or whatever method you use to organize your time to make sure you apply for that job in time. Once I had applied for the job, I would also take a screen grab of the job description and I would save it somewhere or email it to myself, because if you are invited to interview, you might find that the job application has disappeared and you might not remember exactly what the job was. So CVs, I would have a pretty standard CV. I think my CV is designed quite nicely, which makes it stand out a little bit, but I wouldn't go too heavy on designing it up really spectacularly. Like, unless you're going for a design specific job, they just need the information there clearly. I had my name and contact details at the top. I then went into my education history, which was very brief. Like, I would literally just have the institution, the qualification, and what grade I got. I, of course, also had my work history on there, going chronologically from the most recent role to the role that I'd had the most years ago. You can, of course, also include work experience and voluntary positions here. For the most part, I tended to keep these pretty much the same, no matter what job I was applying for. But there were a few skills that I would change here and there depending on what the role was and what specific skills they were giving in the job application. I did also have a hobby section. People have mixed feelings on the hobby section of a CV. I think it's nice. I think it gives a little bit of a sense of the person and if they have anything that is outside the realms of work and education. Oh, and at the start of my CV, I also had a pretty brief paragraph that was just kind of an overview of me as an employee. I generally did keep this the same on every job. The cover letter, however, should be very, very specific to the particular role you are applying for. This is a significant amount of work, and I know how difficult it is if you are holding down a job or doing education, and on top of that you are trying to write a personalized cover letter for every job. It does take time. I know it's a pain in the arse. You will get quicker at it the more you do. I think my method of doing cover letters is really good. People will have their own ways of doing it, but these are just my recommendations. I wouldn't bother with kind of like the traditional letter formatting with like an address and a date on it at the start of a cover letter. I think that's just wasting space where you could be talking about why you're perfect for the job. Unless I had the specific name of the person I was addressing it to. In fact, Twitter is really good for this. If you see someone retweeting a job advertisement or posting about a job advertisement, you can always ask, who should I address this letter to? But if I didn't have a name, I would go for to whom it may concern. Some people go for dear sir, madam. I'm not a fan of dear sir, madam. I find it really weirdly stuffy and old-fashioned, and not everyone is a sir or a madam. That's just my personal preference. I would always go for to whom it may concern. I don't think this is massively important, really. Just don't say dear sirs. First line is, I am writing to apply for the job of X at Y company. and then you brown nose. It's brown nosing, but like professional brown nosing. You basically want to demonstrate that you have researched this company, that you know about this company, that you know what is relevant for them now. It does not matter what year they were founded in. Nobody wants a history lesson on the company that they work for. They want to know if you know about what has been happening in the past 12 months. You want to be demonstrating that you want to work for this company specifically, and what about them is so impressive that you're dying to work for them. The resources that you should be using for this are places like the Bookseller. The Guardian Books is really good. The publisher's own website, the publisher's own social media. Have they made any really interesting acquisitions recently? Have they won any awards? Looking at the most recent winner of the Nibby Awards is always really fantastic for that. Have they announced something recently? My go-to is always prizes. Like, if I can say how impressed I was by them winning this prize and this prize recently, that's perfect. So you want to have this initial paragraph, which is like, this is why I want to work for you guys specifically. My next paragraph would be about my experience that was most relevant to this role. So for me, applying for publishing jobs, this was always going to be my publishing masters. I would talk about the skills that it had given me, specific things that I had done and how I demonstrated these skills, specific assignments that I have done, and I would alter all of this depending on what role I was applying for. Actually, throughout my masters, I quite strategically did assignments on different areas of publishing, so I would always have something in my back pocket to pull out. I really would strongly cater this paragraph towards this specific job I was applying for. Do not be afraid to boast about your achievements. Something I see again and again when I read other people's cover letters is that they are really underselling themselves and they're not realizing the experience that they have. It's little things like some people will say, in one of their jobs, they got lunch for everyone. Did you get lunch for everyone, or did you organise catering? Did you book taxis for people, or did you arrange transport? It's just little changes like that that make these tasks sound more professional. And they are. None of that is lying. Now, obviously, I realise not everyone will have that publishing experience. You really have to make a judgment on what your most relevant experience is here. Maybe you have had some work experience in the publishing industry before. Maybe you haven't, but you've worked in retail and you've gained these particular skills that are relevant to your job. Anything that is interacting with the public, any element of customer service is hugely relevant for publishing. Also, any kind of office job, particularly for getting those entry-level roles, if you do have any level of office experience, that is a huge advantage. Do not undersell yourself here. At the end of this paragraph, do always bring it back to the particular company. See if you can connect your experience in some way to what they are doing at the moment. Always bring it back to that company. My third paragraph would be other experience that I have that maybe isn't quite as relevant, but is still relevant. Here, I was normally talking about jobs that I'd had that weren't the most relevant thing I had, but were still relevant. Work experience that I'd had. I would sometimes talk about clubs and societies I was in at university. And again, I would completely change this, pick and choose what I was putting in depending on the role. And again, always connecting it back to the company. An example here of how you can connect it to the company could be something like, maybe at university you were part of a society that was focused on sustainability, and maybe you've read that publisher's statement on their stance on sustainability, their plans for sustainability, and you want to tell them how impressed you are with that plan and you would love to be part of a company that has that kind of focus. Maybe you ran the social media of the pub that you used to work at. Again, there's a way of phrasing that. There's a big difference between saying I posted on Instagram for the pub I worked at and saying I curated and managed the business's social media feed. Again, it's not a lie. Can you connect that to how impressed you are by their social media? If I was mentioning my YouTube videos as part of my cover letter or on my CV in the hobby section, I wouldn't say I make YouTube videos. I would say I run a YouTube channel, which has given me experience in content creation, managing long-term projects, and building online communities. They're a way of phrasing things that make them sound more impressive. Then I would just have a final paragraph that is basically like, okay, thanks, bye. A strong concluding sentence to bring it back to why you want to work at that company specifically. If you have read one of their books recently and really loved it, do not be afraid to say so. Something that I think trips people up with cover letters sometimes is that they have been given the very good advice of show why you want to work for this company. But I think people put the emphasis on the wrong place when they interpret this advice. People often interpret it as, why do you want to work for this company? That's not where the emphasis should be. The emphasis should be on, why do you want to work for this company? You want to demonstrate to them why you love what they do, why that is the particular company that you would love to work for. Look, whether that's true or not is another thing. But if you want a job, make it sound like you do. General tips for your cover letter is do not go over a page. I know the temptation is there to cram all of the things that are going to show off why you are perfect for this job. I know that temptation is there, but your cover letter is also testing your ability to write clearly and concisely. If you didn't get a chance to talk about this particular area of your experience in your cover letter, it will be on your CV, they will see it, and if you are invited for interview, you will be able to expand on these things. Do not have any spelling mistakes. Like, I have been there. I have sent off a job application and then reread my cover letter and realised there was a spelling mistake in it, and I've immediately known I'm not going to get that job. Publishing is so competitive, and sometimes it will come down to those really minute little things. I hope this advice was helpful. I am by no means an expert. I have never hired anyone within the publishing industry. I have hired people in other places of work I was in, but never within publishing, so I'm definitely not an expert. But these are just some of the things that I have found that worked for me. You will get rejections. You will get publishers that just ghost you and don't reply. You will get the automated emails. You will get a lot of rejection. I got countless rejections. Like, I don't even want to know how many. But if you keep at it, you'll get there. Do check out the links that I've left down below in the description, because they will be really helpful as well. If you have any more specific questions, do leave them in the comments or send me a message and I will get back to you as quickly as I can. And of course, best of luck. I will talk to you in my next video and also in the next episode in this series of Getting Into Publishing, which is going to be all about interviews, which are my favourite thing. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will talk to you soon.